You're welcome to the Making of Me podcast, where we explore the defining moments and challenge that shape who we have become. Today, we are joined by Nancy A Ferraro, an attorney, author, and advocate whose memoir, When the Bug Break, our share house journey, raising a multiply handicap adopted child from Romania, while also parenting her own son. Nancy's story highlights resilience, love, and the power of advocacy in the face of unimaginable challenge. It's really a pleasure to have you on the show, Nancy.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be
Yeah,
here. Thanks for having me.
yeah, thank you, Nancy. So, Nancy, what were some of the challenges that shape you into who you are today?
The biggest challenge and the biggest surprise that I was not expecting was the challenge of parenting a child who is multiply handicapped. And George suffers from, as you said, he's from Romania. He suffers from fetal alcohol syndrome, amongst many other disabilities. But fetal alcohol syndrome, in particular, causes extraordinary violence in children. And so to be the victim of that violence almost every day for almost a decade was one of the most unexpected and most challenging things that ever happened to me. So when we survived all of that and got George placed in a group home, I felt an obligation to tell my story because I realized that I couldn't possibly be the only parent who has gone through traumatic parenting.
Yeah, wow, that was really a whole lot. Being that initially when you actually more like adopted him, was there was no you didn't know what the outcome was going to be compared to down the line. Yeah, it's really a whole lot, and I was glad that you're able to commit to it and later share your stories to please others.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
So how did you navigate the emotional complexity of balancing the need of two children, one with special needs and the other neurotypical?
I can't say that I was graceful or ultimately successful about it, although I tried. When you have a child who takes up 100% of your time and energy, the typical child often gets left to fend for themselves. And I really was doing backflips to try to give my older son somewhat of a normal childhood. But there's something that happens in the dynamic where my older son felt like he had to protect me from George. And he inserted himself when George would start to rage. And that was the last thing I wanted to happen. He became the third adult, so to speak, in the relationship. So managing that was extremely difficult. And I let him go places and do things that I probably would not have let him do under normal circumstances because I didn't want him exposed to that responsibility or that trauma. So it was a very large balancing act, but sometimes I just couldn't shield him from it. So that was the hardest part of having those two children. If I had one of them at a time, right? If George were my only child, it would have been a different dynamic, right? But you love them, each my children, you love them equally, and your heart is so torn that you have to make decisions in the moment that you might not have made if you were not under stress.
So what lessons do you learn about resilience, love, and perseverance through this parenting journey?
Resilience came, actually, the realization of resilience came much later. I did not believe I was resilient when I was going through it because, frankly, I was just trying to survive. I was trying to preserve my family. I was trying to preserve or attain some sense of normalcy. And it wasn't until years later when I looked back on that and actually took a breath and realized that, yes, I did have that inner strength and I did have that inner power, but it's always something we don't know is there, right? You don't really know it's there until you need to tap into it. And even then, you are just reacting, right? So now that I look back on it, there's so many lessons that I learned. And one of the reasons I wrote the book was to keep parents from committing the same mistakes I made and to teach some of the lessons that I learned along the way.
So can you discuss the support system or resources that were most helpful to you along the way?
Support systems were very informal. I found the most support and information, believe it or not, from mothers I met in the grocery store,
Mm.
mothers who were walking my path, and mothers who knew how to direct me. Because in my experience, the agencies that held the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, the after programs, the respite, the things that I needed to survive, I found them hiding from me and very secretive and very difficult to access. But once I found a mother who had gone through the process and gave me the magic words, I'm not going to say it was easy, but doors opened, things changed. I had somebody at the Division of Developmental Disabilities in New Jersey ask me, "How did you find that out? Are you the FBI? CIA, is this a secret?" Because I had to fight for everything. But it wasn't because someone at an agency took my hand and said, "Let me lead you through it." It was because a mother said, "I've been through this. Say this, do this, and go here." It's amazing.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So, how has your experience as a special needs parent shaped your perspective on life, family, and motherhood?
I feel almost invincible now because not only did we survive George, we actually thrived through George. And knowing that you don't know your strength until you're tested,
Yeah.
right? You don't know it. And I want all mothers, everyone who's stood in the shoes of motherhood, to know this. You're not alone. And you're not meant to do this alone. The biggest lesson for me was asking for help was not a sign of weakness. It was, in fact, a sign of courage and strength. Because until you throw back that mantle of shame and actually acknowledge the issue, ask for help, you're really just hiding behind your own fear.
Amazing. I'm really just hiding beyond your own fear. And it's really amazing being that you just make progress. So sometimes the strength we have is not yet known until a particular situation comes into being. And there's a whole lot of actually reviews to it. And the fact that I've gone through it, I've come out of it, you are not stronger compared to if you hadn't gone through any of those stuff. And it's really amazing. So what advice do you have for other parents facing similar challenge with children who have disability or special need?
I have crafted my own plans of advocacy, and this advice is based strictly on my experience. My first tip is to acknowledge the feelings and sit with them, surprising as that may be, because until you sit with the feelings, you can't be emotionally ready to do any future planning for your child, right? I acknowledge that any kind of advocacy for your child, any parenting for your child in this field is hard, sometimes impossibly hard. No amount of love can override the grief, the burnout, the regret, the rage. But sitting with the hard feelings, that's not weakness. It's actually what gives you your power back. The moment you say, "This hurts," you make the space for healing and for help. So that's my first step. My second step is to lead with the can do. So, when we have children with needs, disabilities, hardships, drug problems, we are so focused on the disabilities, the inabilities, the lack, that we forget to document and celebrate the strengths. So even one small advancement should be celebrated. So start every interaction when you're advocating for your child with something your child can do. That becomes the foundation of your conversation, because then that leads you to your next step of building a team. Once you have people nodding and saying, "Oh, yes, George got through the day without having a meltdown," or George got through 10 minutes of story time, they start to get on your team. And so the third tip is to build a team. You have to know your rights under the law. You have to know what your child is entitled to. You don't have to be a lawyer, but you have to know your rights, because then you have to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable, because nothing changes if we stay silent. The system's overwhelming, it's intimidating, but you don't have to go it alone. Okay, you form a team. Once you get caregivers nodding and saying, "What is something that we can do to support this behavior? How can we make this better for your child?" Well, then the whole conversation changes. It doesn't solve everything, but it turns from hostile to collaborative.
Yeah.
And when I approach the schools with this, we both want what's best for my son. It opened doors. People started talking. People got, that tense feeling when they don't want to. It all relaxed. So you're not just a parent. You are the team captain and the expert. Important.
Yeah.
So the next thing is, don't do it alone. And there were times when I thought nobody would ever understand this. Nobody would even believe it. And when I met my dear friend, Susan Anderson, in the grocery store, a woman who had walked the path and was still smiling, I realized that there are people out there that understand what you're going through without judgment, without anything but love. And that changes the whole conversation. So even joining a parent support group, finding a respite provider. Here we had a guy on television. His name is Dr. Phil, and he used to do this self-help show. And I was walking by the TV one day, it was on, and he said, "You cannot give from an empty cup." And that resonated with me because as much as I was trying, I was out. My gas tank was empty and I had nothing left to give. And suddenly it felt like self-care was the most important thing I could do for my family. Taking a walk, taking a little painting class, learning how to meditate. Those things I think not only saved my life, but improved my ability to advocate and be present for my family.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Don't do it alone. And also, when you stay silent, most times you can't change anything. I think there really a whole lot of this stuff to really learn from this. Yeah, thank you so much for actually sharing. So, in what way has sharing your stories through your memoir and speaking engagements help you heal or raise awareness about special need parenting?
There are so many parents out there who are suffering in silence because when our children have troubles and we can't solve them, not only do we blame ourselves, society blames us. We lose our social outlets, we isolate, we lose our resources, and frankly, it shouldn't be that way. And so the reason I wrote this book was to let parents know you're not alone. I wrote the book to shed light into that really dark tunnel where there seems to be no end to our children's troubles, and to throw back the mantle of shame and actually get help. Because, as you said, if you stay silent, nothing changes.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Nancy, for the awareness you create, and also for actually more like be a channel for a whole lot of parents who doesn't even know how to air their voice, who doesn't even know where to go. And I think having these conversations make it a little bit less burdensome for them, being that they know out there someone there actually knows what they are going through. And I think it's really reassuring just knowing the fact that someone understands and someone can relate. And yeah, it's really amazing. So, how do you balance self care and caregiving responsibility as a parent of special needs child?
It's very important that you demand what you need. You're not asking for a favor. You're demanding respect and you're demanding the things that you need in order to care for your child. And recognizing that is the first step to getting the help you need, right? So finding the respite, there are resources out there. You have to be willing to advocate for yourself and for your child. Getting out, using your spouse as just a respite care for yourself. Take a class, do something, get out of your head, think about something other than your child. Because once you start to do that, it's almost like being drowned, right? You're stuck underwater, you can't breathe, and suddenly you come up for air. When you come up for air, that gives you the strength to then go back down, right? And to deal with the other things. The word relentless comes to mind because the pounding is relentless. It doesn't stop. You're not going to wake up and suddenly there's a cure and everything's beautiful. Wouldn't that be great? But that's not going to happen. And once you adjust your expectations for your child, learn to accept the small progress steps, the little things, then not expecting, George to ever drive a car, live on his own. That was huge for me. That was huge. But once I adjusted my expectations, realized that I alone could not care for George, it lifted a burden. And so it became more about getting things in place and supports in place that would support us as a family going through this journey together. And I'm so enormously grateful that I was able to put that in place because it was essential. So I urge everyone, if you are going through traumatic parenting, I would love you to reach out to me. I would love you to join my support group on Facebook. I would love to talk to you.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Nancy. So, Nancy, what is the key message or takeaway do you hope our readers and listeners gain from your experience and your advocacy work and your book?
Stop living in shame. It's not your fault. And get help. Speak up and use your community and be that light for someone else because you never know that the experience you're going through might be something that someone else needs to see. And when you can be that support for someone else, it gives back to you as well. So you never know what's going to happen if you offer an encouraging word. When I speak in front of mothers and I relate my story and I acknowledge their pain, we all cry. Everybody cries because they finally feel heard. You deserve to be heard.
This is really, really amazing. Well, thank you all, Nancy, for sharing your stories and courage, advocacy, and unconditional love. Your journey shows that even while life throws unexpected and unimaginable challenge our way, we can rise, create change, and inspire others through our actions.